When Adolf Hitler took his own life in the bunker beneath Berlin in April 1945, he left behind not only the ruins of a shattered empire, but also one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century. What happened to the fortune of the man who ruled Europe through blood and terror? Gold, artworks, real estate, and cash worth hundreds of millions had once been under his control. But when the smoke cleared and the Reich collapsed, most of it was gone, vanished into the shadows of history. So, what really happened to Hitler's assets after World War II? In the final days of the Third Reich, as Soviet troops closed in on Berlin, chaos replaced the rigid order that had once defined Hitler's Germany. The dictator's personal fortune, meticulously documented in Nazi financial ledgers and bank records, was suddenly at risk of total destruction. Before the war, Hitler had built immense personal wealth, not through legitimate labor or business, but through manipulation, propaganda, and exploitation of power. The foundation of his riches came from the sale of his book Mein Kampf. Published in 1925, it became required reading in Nazi Germany. Every soldier, every bride and groom, every public servant received a copy. By 1944, it had sold more than 12 million copies, generating royalties worth tens of millions of Reichsmarks. Those funds were funneled into personal accounts, shell companies, and the sprawling bureaucracy that sustained Hitler's image. But Mein Kampf was only the beginning. Hitler had also been exempted from paying income tax since 1933, a privilege secretly arranged by his finance minister and bureaucrats eager to please him. The unpaid taxes alone amounted to over 400,000 Reichsmarks by the late 1930s, a vast sum at the time. He used this advantage to purchase properties across Germany and Austria, including the Berghof, his mountain retreat in Bavaria, which he expanded using government funds disguised as state security expenses. In essence, Hitler blurred the line between personal wealth and state resources. His chancellery staff handled both his personal finances and Nazi party funds interchangeably. Artwork seized from Jewish collectors, bank accounts stolen through Aryanization policies, and valuables confiscated from occupied territories were often categorized under vague labels: Reich property, party property, or simply for the Führer. By the time the Allies invaded Germany in 1945, the scope of Hitler's assets was staggering but scattered. Gold reserves held in Reichsbank vaults, artworks hidden in salt mines, and currency deposits in neutral countries like Switzerland formed a tangled web of ownership. When Allied troops captured Berlin, they found fragments of this fortune. Inside the Reich Chancellery and the Führer bunker, they discovered documents referencing secret accounts and hidden treasures. Yet the man who could explain it all, Martin Bormann, Hitler's private secretary, had vanished into the night. Bormann had been the key figure controlling the dictator's finances. In the war's last months, he oversaw the transfer of enormous sums out of Berlin, directing trusted intermediaries to hide assets across Germany and Austria. Some reports suggest that shipments of gold and cash were smuggled toward Bavaria, others toward neutral Switzerland, where Nazi officials hoped to secure safe passage in exchange for bribes. The Allies began a massive investigation immediately after the war. Under the US Safe Haven program, intelligence officers tracked Nazi funds hidden abroad. They discovered that vast amounts of gold from the Reichsbank had been transferred to Swiss banks and melting facilities. Much of it had been looted from occupied nations or taken from victims of the Holocaust. But linking any specific portion of that gold directly to Hitler himself proved nearly impossible. The dictator had deliberately distanced his personal finances from traceable accounts, preferring informal networks managed by Bormann and the Nazi Party treasury. Meanwhile, what remained of Hitler's tangible properties fell into Allied hands. His Munich apartment, where he had written parts of Mein Kampf, was seized by the US military government. The royalties from the book, still generating income through post-war printings abroad, were frozen and later redirected. Eventually, the rights to Mein Kampf were given to the Bavarian state, which prohibited its republication in Germany for decades to prevent Nazi propaganda from spreading again. The Berghof, his beloved retreat in the Bavarian Alps, was destroyed by British bombers near the war's end and later demolished completely by the German government. No private heirs were allowed to claim it. Hitler had no children and had left only a vague will, written in the bunker hours before his death, which left his personal belongings to the Nazi Party and the state, both of which ceased to exist upon Germany's defeat. In legal terms, his assets belonged to no one. As de-Nazification proceeded, Allied forces seized thousands of assets linked to the Nazi elite. Hitler's personal effects, his uniforms, photographs, furniture, and art, were catalogued by the Allies. Some were destroyed, others ended up in military archives and museums. A few items, including paintings and documents, were stolen or sold illegally on the black market, giving rise to a dark trade in Hitler memorabilia that persists to this day. But the greatest mystery lay with the missing gold and cash Bormann allegedly transferred. In the years following the war, rumors circulated that Nazi funds had been smuggled to Argentina, Spain, or even hidden in Alpine vaults. The so-called Bormann network became the focus of countless investigations and conspiracy theories. Some researchers believed Bormann survived the war and used these assets to support fugitive Nazis through organizations like Odessa. Others claimed the money was used to establish secret businesses in South America. However, most credible evidence points elsewhere. In 1998, declassified records and forensic studies confirmed that Bormann had died in Berlin in May 1945, trying to escape the city. His remains, found decades later near the Lehrter station, were identified through DNA testing. That revelation shattered many of the post-war myths, but it also meant that the knowledge of Hitler's last financial transfers died with him. The Swiss connection, however, remained undeniable. After the war, Allied investigators discovered that the Reichsbank had deposited at least 400 million Swiss francs in various accounts. Some of it came from looted central bank reserves of occupied countries, some from the personal wealth of Nazi leaders. The Swiss authorities resisted full disclosure for decades, citing banking secrecy. Only in the 1990s, after intense international pressure, did they admit to holding Nazi-linked assets, which led to partial restitutions. Whether any of this gold could be tied specifically to Hitler remains unproven. Hitler's art collection followed a similar fate. During his rule, he had planned the creation of the Führer Museum in Linz, Austria, a grand institution meant to display the finest art in Europe, much of it stolen from Jewish collectors and occupied nations. By 1945, over 6,000 artworks had been earmarked for this museum. The Monuments Men, the Allied task force dedicated to recovering looted art, found many of these pieces hidden in salt mines in Altersee, Austria. They were recovered and returned to their rightful owners or held in custody by post-war governments. None of the art officially remained in Hitler's estate. As for his personal accounts in Germany, they were liquidated by the Allied Control Council. The funds were redirected to state restitution programs and war reparations. Hitler's relatives, distant half-siblings and nephews, had no legal claim to his wealth, and most lived quietly under assumed identities or left Germany altogether. His half-sister, Paula Hitler, lived modestly in Austria under her maiden name and received nothing from her brother's former empire. By the 1950s, what had once been Hitler's immense fortune had effectively vanished. His personal papers and possessions were divided among Allied archives. His real estate was destroyed or nationalized. His intellectual property was seized, and his gold, if it survived, was absorbed into the murky pools of post-war reparations, restitution, and black market trades. And yet, despite all efforts to erase his legacy from material wealth, traces of it occasionally resurfaced in strange and uncomfortable ways. In 2014, a cache of Nazi-era art worth over $1 billion was discovered in Munich, hidden by the son of a Nazi art dealer who had once worked directly with Hitler's circle. None of those paintings could be definitively proven to have been owned by Hitler himself, but they were remnants of the same plundered world his ambitions had built. Today, the legal successor to most Nazi-era property in Germany is the federal government, or in some cases, the state of Bavaria. The royalties from Mein Kampf, now in the public domain, were long used by Bavaria to fund educational programs warning of the dangers of totalitarianism. It is an ironic twist. The propaganda that once financed tyranny now serves to prevent it from returning. In the end, what became of Hitler's assets is less a tale of treasure and more a reflection of the moral bankruptcy of his regime. His fortune was never truly his. It was stolen from nations, from victims, from culture itself. When his empire collapsed, his wealth disintegrated with it, swallowed by war, chaos, and justice. The world ensured that the man who sought to own everything left behind nothing of lasting value. When Adolf Hitler died, he left behind no dynasty, no inheritance, and no monument. His power, once absolute, dissolved into dust, and his fortune scattered across a broken continent. In the end, the dictator who sought to control the world owned nothing, not even his own legacy. But the story of his missing assets still lingers, a reminder of how evil can corrupt not only nations, but even the pursuit of wealth itself. Do you think some of Hitler's fortune still lies hidden somewhere in Europe? Or was it all lost to time and history? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more deep dives into the untold history of World War II. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.